Those words came out of my son's mouth with the coldness of someone turning off an old machine. No warning, no respect, no consideration for everything I had done for him. I was sitting on the porch watching the sunset, as I had done every evening since retiring, when he gave me the news as if it were the most normal thing in the world. There was no conversation, no coffee together, just an announcement. Starting that night, I would have to find another place to live, and worse. That same day, his in-laws arrived with suitcases, hugs, and even a cake in their hands, as if they were checking into a luxury bed and breakfast. But it was my house, my home, the place where I raised my son and buried my wife. It cut through me like a shard of glass. But I didn't react. I stayed quiet because I had already understood everything. And you know what I did? I left with a black garbage bag in my hands, the same way many people get rid of junk. But I left something on the kitchen table, a manila envelope, discreet, with a document inside. Nobody paid attention. Before we proceed, please subscribe to the channel and comment below with the current time and your location. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, was busy arranging plates with borrowed silver utensils while her father was already opening a beer and sitting on my couch. My son was at the grill as if he were the king of that place. But he had forgotten one detail. That paper I left wasn't just a notice. It was the deed, signed and registered at the courthouse. It said in big letters that the house had been sold and the new owner would arrive on the day of the party. My name is Albert. I'm 75 years old, and this story you're about to hear isn't fiction or just venting. It's a message for everyone who thinks fathers are obligations, that old people are dead weight, that gratitude has an expiration date. I'm from a small town in Tennessee, rural country. I was born in a modest home and raised with hard work and faith. I lost my father at 12 years old in a flood that took even our garden. My mother held the house together and raised us with courage. At 16, I came to Nashville. I slept in boarding houses, washed floors at grocery stores, was an office boy and then a truck driver. Almost 25 years hauling loads and making deliveries. When I became a driver, I thought my life would improve, and it did. I met Amanda, who worked at a diner on Broadway. We got married. She was my foundation. She gave me a son, just one. And for him I did everything, even what I couldn't afford. The house where all of this happened, I started building when my son was still in diapers. It was small at first, just 2 rooms. But each brick was laid with sweat, each door with hope. When my retirement came, I finished the work and put it in his name. It was a promise I had made to Amanda before she died. Leave it to him, Albert. We've already lived what we had to live. Now it's his turn. Amanda passed away peacefully in her sleep, but left me with permanent pain. But I still had Stephen and thought that was enough until that day. Because when a son looks at his father and says, "You have to leave," what he's really saying is, "You're no longer useful." I never imagined I would hear that inside my own house. I got up slowly, took my Bible, my clothes, and a photo of Amanda from the bedside table. I walked away without looking back. But before leaving, I dropped off the envelope with the deed. At that moment, nobody cared, but he would regret it. So listen to the end. And if this story touches you, comment below what moved you most, and tell me where you're watching from. I like getting to know you all. Go ahead and follow the channel. Every day there's a new story that maybe you need to hear. 2. At the motel where I stayed, a simple place near the bus station, I sat on the bed and took a deep breath. The fan made an old noise, and the musty smell reminded me of the time I slept in boarding houses when I was young. But there, for the first time in years, I was able to think clearly. I had been foolish, naive. I thought giving away the house, the truck, my life would make my son love me more. But love that's bought with things dies over time. And what remained in me that night was just silence. A silence full of hurt, but also of a plan, because I never got around to registering the transfer of the house. The donation document I signed was never taken to the courthouse. I was still legally the owner of everything, and that changed everything. That same night, I called Edward, a friend from my trucking days. Today he's a lawyer, one of those respected ones who wears suits and speaks softly. I told him everything. He listened in silence, then said, "Albert, do you want justice or revenge?" I answered. "Neither. I just want him to know that I'm not disposable." The next day, the house was sold quickly. He took care of everything, and the new owner was someone who made sure to accompany the old owner at the right time. Meanwhile, they were living as if everything was a celebration. I saw it on social media. Set table, grill fired up. His father-in-law in the hammock drinking wine. And the cruelest part of all, my grandson Ethan running through the living room with the toy I gave him last Christmas. He still didn't understand what they had done to me. But one day, he would. On Saturday was the official welcome lunch. The neighbors were invited. My daughter-in-law got dressed up. My son wore the blue shirt he got for my birthday. But when the doorbell rang, and I appeared with the new owner by my side, time stopped, and my son's look was never the same again. When he opened the door and saw me standing there at the gate with my pressed shirt and steady gaze, he didn't even blink. He stood mute, mouth half open, like someone who forgot to breathe. Beside me, the new owner of the house adjusted his glasses and held the black folder under his arm. Nothing needed to be said. That image spoke for itself. The silence of our arrival weighed more than any words. The smell of meat on the grill, the animated voices inside. Everything was fading. In his head, only one thing remained. What is this old man doing here? But he didn't have time to ask because the man beside me entered first and I followed right behind. For the first time, I entered my former house as a guest. Jessica came out of the kitchen with a tray in her hand and stopped in the middle of the hallway. Her father got up from the armchair where I used to nap and stood without understanding. My grandson ran to me shouting, "Grandpa," and that almost broke me inside. But I held myself together. The scene was strange for everyone except me. I knew exactly what I was doing there. The living room was still the same wall with that faded beige tone. The photo frame with their wedding picture still in the same place. But the atmosphere had changed. It was the smell of surprise, of fear, of a guilty conscience. The new owner took the documents from his folder and placed them on the coffee table right in front of my son and said, "Good afternoon. My name is Thomas. I came to officially present my property. This house, gentlemen, is now mine." My son's face collapsed. He looked at me, at Thomas, at the papers as if expecting all of this to be a joke. But it wasn't. He turned and asked almost in a whisper, "You sold the house, Dad?" I just nodded. He tried to laugh like someone trying to escape from a nightmare. "But you said you had given it to me." And then I spoke for the first time in a long time with firmness. "I gave it. Stephen, I gave everything I had. But you never understood that giving doesn't mean disappearing. That giving is not synonymous with being discarded. He went pale, sat on the couch. Jessica went to the bedroom, and her father left the house without saying a word, disappeared down the sidewalk without looking back. But I was still there, and my grandson was still hugging me around the waist, not understanding half of what was happening. So I bent down and said to him, "You're still going to grow up a lot, boy, and you'll learn that love is something we take care of, not throw away." He looked at me and nodded, not quite understanding, but hugging me even tighter. At that moment, the house was no longer the same. The atmosphere was different. Shame spread through the walls, through the pictures, through the corners where respect once existed. Thomas, with all the politeness in the world, asked them to vacate the house within 72 hours. He didn't need to. His presence there was already a sentence. My son didn't cry, didn't apologize, just stayed quiet. And that hurt more than any scream, because it was in that silence that I realized. He didn't regret throwing me out. He was desperate about losing what he thought was his. And that's the hardest part to swallow. I left calmly, on the sidewalk. I felt the wind on my face as if I were returning from a war. And in a way, that's what it was. A silent war, where sometimes those who stay quiet win. I took a cab and went back to the motel. On the way, I asked the driver to take a detour down the street where I lived with Amanda for more than 35 years. I passed slowly in front of the school where Stephen studied. I remembered the times I left work and went straight to pick him up just to see him smiling with his backpack. How he used to say, "I love you, Dad," in front of everyone. The same boy who, now as an adult, had traded his father for a freeloading father-in-law and a new grill. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat looking at the ceiling, remembering the conversations with Amanda on the porch, the promises we made, the prayers she said before sleeping. And I remembered something she told me one of the last nights. "Don't give everything of yourself, Albert, because sometimes the heart of the one who receives isn't ready." At the time, I thought she was exaggerating. Today, I see she was just preparing me as she always did. If this story is touching your heart, comment below what moved you most and tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes a story like this can heal a distance that not even time could resolve. And if you know someone who was left aside, who today lives with a heavy heart, share this video. Sometimes what we need isn't justice, it's reconnection. And sometimes it comes when we least expect it. The next day, I went to have coffee at the diner we used to frequent. The owner, Mr. Harold, recognized me from afar, sat with me. We talked, and he told me something that stayed in my head for the rest of the day. "Albert, some people need to lose to learn, but some people only learn when they lose what should never have been given." That hit me like a slow bullet because that's what it was. I gave too much. I went beyond what a father needed to be. And my son confused love with obligation, affection with convenience, presence with burden. After that day, I never went back to that street, nor wanted to know where he went. But I heard from acquaintances that they moved to a rented apartment small without a yard, without a porch, without soul. Jessica went back to work. The father-in-law disappeared. And Stephen, well, he never spoke to me again. No phone calls, no messages, nothing. But you know what's worse? I already expected it. What he'll never understand is that I didn't come back that day to get revenge. I came back to show that I still exist, that no father deserves to be forgotten while he still breathes, that a house isn't measured by its furniture, but by its memories. And mine he tried to erase, but couldn't. 4 days later, I received an unexpected call. It was the doorman of the building where my son had gone to live with his family. A nice gentleman who knew me by sight from the times I used to pick up my grandson from school and sometimes passed by there. He said, "Mr. Albert, excuse me for interfering, but Stephen passed by here looking terrible. He's different, too quiet. And today he dropped a paper with your name on it, but it looked like he had been crying. I just thought you should know." I thanked him, hung up, and stayed with that hammering in my head for hours because despite everything, part of me still wanted to believe that there was a hint of regret in my son's heart. But time teaches, and sometimes it teaches in the hardest way possible when love becomes absence. I started walking the streets like someone carrying not just age on his back, but also a living grief. The grief of being a father to someone who no longer sees you as a father. I would sit on the park bench, watch other people's grandchildren running with their grandparents, and try to remember the last time Ethan gave me a real hug. Those hugs that came from nowhere for no reason. Because when a child hugs a grandfather, they don't ask for anything in return. It's just pure love. I miss that. But even more, I miss being remembered, having someone call and ask, "Are you okay? Dad, did you eat today? Want me to stop by?" Nothing. No messages. And that's when something different happened. I was invited to speak at the senior community center. A young man I knew from the bus stop, now a counselor, saw me sitting on the park bench and said I should go there to tell my story. He said many other seniors were going through similar things that my voice could help. At first I hesitated, talking about my life, showing my wounds, but then I thought maybe this is the only way to transform pain into healing. On the day of the talk, I sat in front of about 50 people. I saw eyes like mine, shoulders bent by age, yes, but also by disappointments that can't always be spoken aloud. I started speaking slowly. My name is Albert. I'm 75 years old. I was a truck driver for more than 40 years. I married Amanda and had one son, and I was expelled from the house I built for him. The room fell silent. Some ladies looked down. A gentleman took a deep breath. I told everything without exaggeration. Just what happened. When I finished, they applauded standing up, but it wasn't a show applause. It was applause from those who recognize themselves, who feel the same pain. And it was there that I realized I wasn't alone and that maybe, just maybe, my silence of so many years had become living words at that moment. After the talk, a lady approached me, Mrs. Betty, 83 years old. She said, "My son did exactly the same thing, but I didn't have the courage to leave. I stayed until the end, hearing insults every day." And she cried, and I hugged her, and in that hug, I felt what my son had stopped giving so long ago. I understood that many of us, the elderly, are ashamed to say we were rejected, that we hide the pain so as not to feel embarrassed, but that strengthened me. Shared pain becomes roots, and where there are roots, there is resistance. In the following days, I began participating more in the conversation circles, group walks, Thursday coffee meetings, and every day I met a new story of fathers, grandfathers, mothers, all with hidden scars, but ready to continue living. It was as if life had shown me that even rejected by my own, I could still be useful to others. And then, one late afternoon, sitting on the porch of the center, my cell phone rang. Unknown number. I answered, and heard a small, hesitant voice. "Grandpa." It was Ethan. I was speechless for a moment. I wasn't expecting it. "Hi, my boy. Everything okay?" He hesitated. "Yes, it's just that my dad won't let me call. But I took Mom's phone. I saw your photo on a poster here at school. Are you going to give a talk here tomorrow? My heart tightened. It was a public school, small, where they gave space for seniors to tell their stories. I didn't even know it was going to be there. I had only accepted because they asked me by letter. I answered with a choked voice. Yes, Ethan. Yes, I am. He smiled. Then I'll stay in the front row. The call dropped right after. But that voice I hadn't heard in months, rekindled something inside me. Not hope in my son, but certainty that my grandson still had salvation. Night fell slowly. I went back to my room and prayed. For the first time in a long time, I prayed out loud. I asked God to help me not harden my heart, because that's what rejection does to us. It dries us up inside. But there, at that moment, with Ethan's voice still echoing, I felt something was changing. I didn't know what or where that would lead me, but I knew deep in my soul that love that is truly given returns one day, even if it takes time, even if it comes through the hands of someone younger, purer, more sincere. The next morning, I arrived early at the school. The security guard recognized me from the poster at the entrance and said they were waiting for me with coffee and a reserved chair in the library. As I walked down the narrow hallway, I saw the bulletin boards full of drawings, Father's Day cards, student messages. And that's when, on a sixth-grade panel, I saw a sheet taped with tape already coming loose at the edges. It was a class assignment. Who is your hero? I got closer. One by one, names appeared. My mom because she works hard. My uncle because he takes care of me. My brother because he's funny. And there, right in the middle, was written in careful handwriting. My hero is my grandfather because he drove trucks and took people safely. He told me stories from when he was young. He taught me to respect elders. He's strong even though he's old. He's my grandpa. Albert, signed Ethan. My eyes filled with tears, but I didn't cry. I clenched my fist discreetly like someone holding back a flood in his chest. That simple sheet gave me back something I thought I had lost. My place. Not as a homeowner or head of family or man of respect, but as a grandfather. As someone who still matters to someone. I entered the library with a lump in my throat. The children were sitting on the floor in circles. Ethan was there, saw me, and waved. His look, my God, had longing and also fear. Fear that I was no longer there, that I had disappeared for good. I started talking not about my son's betrayal, but about the value of memory, about the things that really remain, the stories. I said that driving a truck wasn't just going from point to point. It was seeing the city change, people grow, neighborhoods transform. I told them how I met Amanda, how she loved to sit in the front seat and ask questions just to start a conversation. The children laughed, and then without planning, I pulled an old wallet from my pocket and took out an old photo. It was Stephen, small in my lap, wearing a red cap with a missing tooth. I slowly raised the photo and said, "This is my son, and this moment was the best day of my life." He had gotten a free ice cream because he fell and hurt his knee, and even crying. He hugged me and said, "Dad, when I grow up, I want to be like you." Silence filled the room. The children stared. I continued, "We grow up, children grow up, and sometimes they get lost. But never stop loving those who took care of you when you didn't even know how to walk." At that moment, Ethan stood up with a red face, crossed the circle, and came to me. He hugged me in front of everyone tight, long, and there, in the middle of that simple library, I cried for the first time in a long time, and it wasn't tears of pain, it was tears of reunion. The principal, a young and very humane woman, called me afterward to talk. She said Ethan had been sad in recent weeks, that he was isolating himself, and that when he found out about the talk, his eyes lit up. He misses you, Mr. Albert, and he knows his father did wrong. I thanked her, but didn't want to feed grudges. I just said that if Ethan wanted to see me, he could, that I wouldn't disappear anymore. As I was leaving school, Ethan pulled me by the arm. "Grandpa, can I show you something?" He took me to the back of the school near the playground, where there was a student bulletin board. He pointed to a photo attached with a magnet. It was a photo we took more than a year ago at the little park. Him, me, and a stray dog he loved. The handwritten caption said, "This is the happiest day of my life." I didn't know that photo existed there or that it meant so much. But at that moment, everything made sense. I said goodbye with a kiss on his forehead and promised I'll come back here more often. He smiled. "Do you really promise?" I answered. "I promise. But now you also have to promise something. Never forget who really loves you, even if they're sometimes far away." He nodded, squeezing my hand tightly. I went back to the motel with a warm heart. For the first time since I was expelled from the house I built, I felt that something inside me was returning to its place. Not trust in my son that might never return, but the certainty that even when they throw us away, true love finds a way to be reborn, even in the midst of the cold concrete of rejection. Sometimes a flower blooms, and it has the name of grandson. Thank you for listening to me this far. And remember one thing: true love may be silenced, but it never fades. If this story moved you, comment below what touched you most and tell me where you're watching from. I love getting to know you all. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Every day there's a new story that maybe you need to hear too. The following days were quiet, but not that suffocating silence of hurt. It was a different silence of peace, of new beginnings. For the first time in months, I woke up and didn't feel that tightness in my chest. I got up, made my coffee, looked out the motel window, and thought, today I exist for someone. And that, my friend, is worth more than any inheritance. Since the school visit, Ethan had been sending me messages secretly. Sometimes a good morning, Grandpa. Sometimes a whispered audio from the school bathroom. I miss you. I would listen and stay there with the phone pressed to my heart, as if that small gesture was sewing me back together inside. But my son, he remained silent. No calls, no words. And incredibly, I no longer expected them. The pain he caused me isn't the kind that gets resolved with a sorry because it wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. He looked me in the eyes and decided I was no longer useful. And that hurts in a place no words can reach. Even so, sometimes I still dreamed of him as a child, running after me in the hallway at home, shouting, "Dad, wait for me." And I would wake up wanting to go back in time just for 5 minutes, just to hug that boy before he became this man who pushed me away. One afternoon, I went to visit the house that now belonged to Thomas. He had called me for coffee. He wanted to know how I was, if I needed help with paperwork, health insurance, anything. He was a generous man. When I got there, everything had changed. The living room wall, which was beige, now had a light green tone. The couch was different, but the plant on the porch, the one I planted with Amanda, was still there. Huge, alive, with leaves shining in the sun. I approached, touched the leaves, and almost heard her voice saying, "See, we always bloom again." We sat on the porch and talked for hours, I talked about Amanda, about the years as a driver, about Stephen's first toy truck. Thomas listened to everything patiently. At the end of our conversation, he said, "Mr. Albert, the house is in good hands, but if you ever want to come back, it's still yours in a way that no one can take away." That moved me because he wasn't talking about possession. He was talking about roots. And roots, my friend, no one can pull out with courthouse papers. On the way back to the motel, I stopped at a newsstand, got an old magazine with crossword puzzles, and on impulse bought an envelope. That night, I wrote a letter, not to Stephen, but to Ethan. A short, simple letter with grandfather's words. I wrote, "If one day you grow up and forget me, that's okay, because as long as you remember that love isn't disposable, I'll have already fulfilled my role. You are my piece of eternity. Take good care of your heart." At the end, I drew a small truck with 2 windows and a smile. It was what he most liked to draw with me when he was little. 3 days later, I received a response, not by letter, but by message. Ethan sent me a photo of the envelope with an audio saying, "Grandpa, my mom saw the letter. She cried, said she misses you too, and that Daddy misses you too, but he's ashamed." I stood still, looking at the phone like someone holding a piece of glass too fragile to touch. I wasn't expecting that. Didn't know if it was true, but just imagining that amid all the pride, there was someone there chewing on their conscience was enough for me. I decided not to respond. Not now, because there are moments when silence teaches more than any words. And maybe, just maybe, my son would start to understand what he did precisely by not hearing my voice trying to justify his pain anymore. I had tried too hard. I had bent over for years, waiting for a gesture. Now it was time to stand up, to let life teach. Because life teaches. My friend, sooner or later, it collects its dues. And when it does, there's no point looking for the person you pushed away. That same week, I was invited to participate in a local radio program. They wanted me to tell my story as an example of overcoming adversity in old age. I accepted. I sat in front of the microphone and spoke with an open heart. I'm not an example of anything. I'm just a father who was left aside, but who found in a grandson's hug a way to stay standing. I told about the house, the expulsion, the sale, the surprise, and at the end I asked them to play a song Amanda loved, "Truckin' by the Grateful Dead." When the music started, I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, as if she were sitting there next to me, saying, "See, Albert, the pain has passed. Now it's time to live free." When the program ended, I received dozens of messages from listeners, people saying they cried, that they saw themselves in my story, that they needed to hear that. And that's when I understood my story, which began with pain, was transforming into balm for others. Maybe that was my new purpose, to speak, to tell, to heal, not with anger, but with truth. And even if my son never says, "Forgive me," I go on, because the forgiveness he didn't give me, I've already given to myself. That night after the radio interview, I slept like I hadn't slept in a long time. My body was tired, yes, but my soul was light. For the first time in months, I didn't wake up in the middle of the night with my face wet from memories. I slept straight through deep. And I dreamed. I dreamed of her, Amanda, my wife, my companion of all hours, the woman who taught me to be a father when I only knew how to be a worker. In the dream, she was sitting on the porch of our old house, the one I built with my own hands, where everything began and ended. She wore her green dress with little flowers, her favorite, and she smiled. But it wasn't a party smile. It was a serene smile of someone who already knew everything and just wanted to see me at peace. "It's getting late, Albert," she said. "You've carried enough. It's time to let go." In the dream, I looked around and saw boxes on the floor. Clothes, pictures, tools, everything piled up like in a move. I answered, "But there are still things here inside, things that don't fit in any box." And she smiled again. That smile she gave when she knew I was resisting the truth. Those things time will carry for you, but only if you let it. The weight of resentment isn't for carrying after 70. I woke up with my heart racing. It was 5:30 in the morning. The motel room window was already letting in the faint blue of daybreak. I sat on the bed with her words echoing in my head. "It's getting late." And I understood that dream wasn't just longing. It was a message. I got up, put the kettle on, made my coffee, and stood looking out the window at the car lights passing by, the muffled sound of the city awakening. Everything seemed clearer. And there, alone in that cramped little room, I made a decision. I needed to leave. Not to run away, but to start over. There was no point waiting for my son to knock on the door anymore. He had already made his choice, and I was finally ready to make mine. I started organizing my things. Few clothes, a box with documents, and a folder where I kept everything of Amanda's photos, letters, her ring. I called Thomas and said, "Friend, I'm thinking of changing cities, starting over in a calmer place. Do you know of anywhere to rent or a good house at a reasonable price?" He answered right away. "There's a small cabin in Chattanooga. Small but beautiful. If you want it, it's yours for as long as you need. Just take good care of it." I laughed. "You have a habit of giving me houses." "Boy," he laughed. "Two. Just returning what you represent. Mr. Albert." 3 days later, I took the bus to Chattanooga with 2 suitcases and a lighter heart than ever. The trip was long but beautiful. The road seemed to embrace me, as if saying, "Now it's your turn to live." I arrived at the cabin near the end of the afternoon. It was simple but full of green. A small stream in the back, 2 bedrooms, a wood-burning stove. I settled in calmly. I put Amanda's photos on the living room shelf, set up the hammock on the porch, and sat down. The silence there was different. It wasn't the silence of someone who was left behind. It was the silence of someone who had finally chosen themselves. That night, I made beans with cornbread. I put on an old record, and there, with the kettle whistling and soft music in the background, I wrote a letter. Not to Stephen, not to Ethan, but to myself. I wrote, "You survived, not with anger, but with dignity, not with revenge, but with choices. You were a father, you were a husband, you were a grandfather, and now you are just Albert. And that's enough." In the following days, I started walking around the town. Simple people, brick streets, the smell of fresh bread coming from bakeries. I met Mr. Walter, who sold homemade jams. Mrs. Dorothy, a widow who knitted scarves and had lived alone for more than 25 years. And little Jack, a 13-year-old boy who loved hearing stories and called me Uncle Trucker. I started telling my stories to him, and without realizing it, found myself doing what I had always done best, sharing. Because what's left after everything ends is what we give to others. Ethan still sent me short messages secretly. "Miss you. I'm okay, Grandpa. I played baseball today." And that sustained me. I knew he would also grow up and maybe one day tell my story around, not as a drama, but as a lesson. because those who learn early that love isn't thrown away grow up differently. And as for Stephen, he never looked for me again. And that's okay because there are children we raise and there are children that time returns. Not all come back, but those who truly stay are worth a lifetime. It had been almost 3 months since I moved to the cabin in Chattanooga, and each day that passed was like my soul breathing deeper. The silence of the countryside has a strange way of healing us. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It slowly removes the dust from forgotten corners of the soul. It sweeps away the pain carefully, without hurry. I started making the porch my favorite place. Every morning I would sit there with my coffee brewed in a cloth filter, an open notebook on my lap, and my memory loose. I wrote things I didn't even know were stored away. Amanda's phrases, childhood memories, excerpts from my driving days. And there, without knowing it, I was rebuilding myself piece by piece slowly. The townspeople began calling me Mr. Albert from the porch, a silly nickname, but it made me smile because when someone calls you by a new name, it's like they're giving you a new chance to exist, to be someone beyond the pain they pushed you into. Little Jack came every day after school, brought his notebook, questions, and curiosity. He called me Story Professor, and I told him everything from when I was almost run over by a horse in rural Tennessee to the day I performed an impromptu wedding inside a broken-down truck in downtown Nashville. He laughed heartily, asked for more recorded on his phone. "I'm going to start a YouTube channel, Uncle, just with your stories." I laughed. "But I don't even know how to work that YouTube thing." And he said, "You don't need to. Your voice is enough." It was on one of those peaceful days with clear skies and the smell of grass in the air that I received a letter. Yes, an actual letter. One of those with a sealed envelope, trembling handwriting, and full name on the return address. It was from Jessica, my former daughter-in-law. I opened it carefully, sitting in the shade of the maple tree. It started like this. "Mr. Albert, I know I might not have the right to write, but I needed to say that we miss you." I continued reading. She talked about how Stephen had been quiet, how since the house sale, he wasn't the same anymore, how my grandson talked about me every day, and how days ago he had secretly listened to the radio interview. He cried a lot, but didn't have the courage to call you. He doesn't know how to ask for forgiveness. Mr. Albert. But I know he carries this in his chest. And at the end of the letter, she wrote, "Ethan is having a birthday and asked for only one thing, that you be there." I stayed silent for a while. The sound of birds continued as if the world followed its course, not knowing that at that moment my heart was swaying. I closed my eyes and thought, and now, Amanda. Because part of me wanted to go, but another part, wounded, old, calloused, didn't want to put myself again where I wasn't wanted. But then I remembered the dream, that warning she gave me. It's getting late. And I understood that maybe this was the last chance to close a wound without needing to tear it open again. 3 days later, I put on my best shirt. That green one Amanda said made me look young. I took the early bus with sweating hands and got off 2 blocks before the school where Ethan's little party was going to be. I arrived at the gate. I wasn't sure if I should go in, but then I heard a shout. "Grandpa," it was him running in the courtyard with a party hat on his head, and a smile bigger than the world. He hugged me as if I had never left. And in that hug, I was coming back. Jessica came to greet me, gave me a kiss on the cheek, and said quietly, "Thank you for coming." Stephen was leaning against the wall, hand in his pocket, eyes on the ground. When he saw me, he raised his gaze. He didn't come to me, but he didn't turn his back either. He stayed there, watched. He heard me tell jokes to my grandson, saw me deliver the gift, saw me smile again. And I know that hurt him more than any scolding would have. Because love, when it's real, when it's free, weighs heavy on those who no longer know how to deal with purity. I didn't demand apologies or compliments or hugs, because those who learn to stand don't beg for invitations to sit at the table anymore. I went because Ethan needed it, because that child still had the ability to see the grandfather before the conflict, before the pride, before the fight for space. When it was time to leave, he grabbed me around the waist. "You're coming back." "Right." "Grandpa," I smiled. "I never really left. My boy. I was just taking a break so we could miss each other." I returned to the cabin at sunset. The sky had orange tones that made you believe the world still has beauty even when you've lost faith in people. I sat in the hammock, closed my eyes, and listened to the sound of wind in the trees. It was as if life was whispering to me. See what's yours, nobody erases. Nobody takes away. It just sleeps for a while. But if it's true, it wakes up one day. It was a Sunday with clear skies, one of those that dawned slowly, unhurried, as if time had mercy on tired hearts. I was in front of the cabin, crouched down, turning over the earth around the basil plant I had planted days before. It was my way of talking to life. Some people talk to God in church. I talked by working the soil. I stayed there for a good while until I heard in the middle of that silence of grass and wind the sound of a car stopping outside. At first I thought it was little Jack coming early, but it wasn't his bike. I got up slowly, brushed the dirt off my hands, and walked with an uneasy heart. The kind of uneasiness you feel when something old is coming back without warning. And when I saw it, my world stopped. It was Jessica's car. Ethan got out first with messy hair and bright eyes. Then her, with an expression that mixed embarrassment and courage. But it was the one who got out last that made my stomach tighten in a way only fathers understand. Stephen, my son, the same one who once told me I was no longer part of his house, the same one who looked at me as if I were just a burden. He got out slowly with slow steps and didn't even try to face me. He stopped next to the car, hands in his pockets, eyes on the dirt ground. Time seemed to have passed hard on him. He had more wrinkles on his face, drooping shoulders, and the look of someone who hadn't slept well in a long time. But there he was. Ethan ran to me and hugged me without thinking. And when a grandson hugs you like that, tight, unfiltered, it's like all the noise in the world disappears. "Grandpa, I brought you something." I smiled. "You brought something, yes." And he pulled my hand like it was an anchor he had found again. He took me to the back of the cabin, where he and little Jack had tied a tire to a tree as a swing. "Look, I learned to make it with real rope. Jack said you taught him how to measure the knot." I laughed with tears in my eyes. "You're getting better than me." "Huh." He smiled. "Do you think my dad will want to play here someday?" I swallowed hard. Who knows? Son, who knows? When we returned to the front, Jessica had already placed glasses on the wooden table and served lemonade. Everything simple. But at that moment, it seemed like a banquet. Stephen remained standing there, as if he were a stranger in his own story. And inside, I confess I was divided. Part of me wanted to ask why, wanted to scream everything that was stuck inside. But another part, more tired, older, wiser, just wanted to observe, because sometimes pain teaches more in silence than anger does screaming. After a while, he approached the porch and for the first time in a long time spoke to me. "Dad, can I talk to you for a minute?" I looked into his eyes. They were the same eyes of the boy I once carried in my lap to take to the doctor when he had a high fever and trembled with fear. The same eyes from when he told me he wanted to be like me. I said simply, "Let's go." We went to the maple tree, the same one he used to climb as a child to steal green apples and then complain about his stomach. He stopped there with his hands in his pockets and his head down. He stayed a while without saying anything. The silence was so thick you could hear leaves falling, until with a trembling voice he said, "I was wrong." Just that, 2 words. But within them was an entire universe of things he never had the courage to say. I was wrong. Without explanation, without justification, without flourish. I kept looking at the ground, and for an instant thought about everything. The day he sent me away. The time he put his in-laws in my place. The celebration party. The gate that closed behind me. And even so, I couldn't hate him. Not because he deserved forgiveness, but because I didn't deserve to carry more weight than life had already given me. I looked at him. You were wrong. Yes. And it wasn't little. But I wasn't waiting for you to say that because I learned not to expect anything more from those who already took everything from me. He nodded, swallowed hard. I thought you were just a stubborn old man. I thought I was doing right by my family. But I found myself alone. Dad. And then I understood that you weren't the burden. You were what balanced me. He started crying. He cried like someone dissolving inside with trembling knees and shame flowing through his eyes. I didn't cry then because someone needed to be firm. I held his shoulder. Stephen, I never needed an apology. I just needed you to remember who I am. I'm your father, and a father doesn't get erased. We returned slowly. Jessica was wiping her eyes discreetly. Ethan kept drawing. When we sat down, he handed me a paper, a drawing made with colored pencils. It was me, him, and a green truck with the sign reading, "Memories Ahead." I looked at that with a lump in my throat. He looked at me and said, "It's our next trip, Grandpa." And I answered, "Yes, it is, my boy. And this time you're driving." When it was time for them to leave, Stephen approached, extended his hand. I shook it firmly, and for a second he hesitated, as if he wanted to hug me, but didn't know how anymore. I didn't force it, because real reconciliation isn't rehearsed. It comes when it can. And that day was enough. I returned to my wicker chair on the porch, with the sun setting slowly on the horizon. Ethan's drawing in my shirt pocket, the smell of lemonade still in the air, and a breeze that seemed to bring back everything that pain had tried to steal. I stayed there in silence, thinking about what my Amanda would say if she saw this scene. Maybe she would say, "Took a while, Albert." But it came back, and I would answer looking at the sky. It came back, my dear, in a crooked way. But it came back. My name is Albert. I'm 75 years old. And this story you just heard isn't fiction. It's a message for everyone who thinks love can be thrown away. If this story touched your heart, comment below what moved you most, and tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes a story like this can heal a distance that not even time could resolve. Thank you for listening to me until, and remember, true love may be silenced, but it never fades. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that might just change your life.